If you are someone who feels like you have been on a health journey for an entire lifetime, you have tried every supplement, every diet, seen multiple doctors, and you still do not feel well, you may be suffering with a chronic illness, inflammation, weight loss resistance, but nothing seems to work, or it works for a brief period of time only to have symptoms come roaring back or have new ones appear. Well, today my guest may be that missing link that will finally be your last stop, and you will finally be able to heal. Annie Hopper is a limbic system rehabilitation specialist and founder of the dynamic neural retraining system, DNRS for short, a neuroplasticity based treatment method for multiple chemical sensitivity, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and many other chronic illnesses. Annie provides vital and groundbreaking information on the link between trauma, the brain, and chronic illness, and how neuroplasticity may hold the key to healing. She's the author of Wired for Healing, Remapping the Brain to Recover from Chronic and Mysterious Illnesses. You can find her at retrainingthebrain.com. So welcome, Annie. I am so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. It's my honor to be here with you. Thank you.
When I first heard you speaking on another podcast, I was almost in tears listening to your story because it was so, well, for me, it was relatable. It was one of these things that I thought, oh my gosh, this is a missing link to all of this chronic illness that we're seeing right now around the world. So thank you, first of all, for the work that you do, because I think it's miraculous.
Thank you.
I do. I think it is. Like, I've gone onto your website, I've listened to the stories of how these people have healed themselves through your program. And it's very profound. And so I'm just grateful to have you here. So let's start with that story that I know you've told many times, but it is so powerful. And I know that so many of my listeners will be able to relate.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's see. It started back in 2004, a long, long time ago in a faraway land. Excuse me. In Kelowna, British Columbia, actually. I was a core belief counselor, and I had a job that I loved. I also wrote a newspaper column, and I was featured in local talk radio as an emotional wellness expert, living a fully vibrant, exciting life. Then I moved into a building where, and I moved into an office building for my counseling practice. And unfortunately, the building had mold in it. And also, the office that I rented was right next door to the janitor supply room, where they held all the industrial cleaning chemicals for the building. And over about 5 or 6 months, I was exposed to that on a daily basis. Prior to that, probably about 6 months earlier, I was in a car accident where I had cervical whiplash that was kind of mimicked Parkinson's a little bit. I had a shake in my neck that kind of like a tremor that didn't go away for a long time. And anyway, slowly over the time that I was working in this office, I started developing really weird and unexplainable symptoms. Like I started having insomnia and muscle twitching. And then I started to get headaches all the time. And no matter what I did, the headaches never went away. I started to get increased sensitivities to smells, specifically perfumes and colognes and anything that had any kind of scented product in it. And not only did I become sensitive to smells, but my sense of smell actually changed. You know, perfumes no longer smelled like perfume. Perfumes smelled like toxic bug spray. And not only could I smell it, but I could taste it. And it tasted toxic. It felt like I was being poisoned, actually. So that was kind of the beginning of the sensitivities. And what happened is, like anybody else, I started to see my doctors and anyone for help. I was like, what the heck is going on? It's so weird. I can't go places anymore. I can't participate in life. I feel like I'm sick all the time. I've got all these aches and pains that I can't explain. My digestive issue is off. I'm starting to get all these sensitivities. Can somebody please tell me what's going on? So thus I went to a whole bunch of specialists and eventually made my way to an environmental doctor who told me that I had tox- a toxic, uh, a heavy metal toxicity issue and that I needed to detox my body. So I was like, bring it on. Of course, I'm willing to detox. I'll do whatever you need me to do because my life is really miserable and I can't live my life anymore. So I detoxed to Mars and back in 10,000 different ways. And guess what? At the end of the day, I was still sick. And at the end of the day, I was getting worse. And I was like, what is going on? This isn't making sense. This is supposed to be helping me. How come I'm not getting any better? And not only was I not getting any better, but my sensitivities were increasing. And I'll talk a little bit about what those symptoms were first.
Mm.
Not only was it my sense of smell, but it was my cognitive ability too. I suffered from a lot of brain fog. I could not formulate sentences anymore. I couldn't string words together. And for someone in the communication industry, that was really difficult for me. I felt like I was a dumbed down version of myself. I didn't even feel like myself, actually. I used to be really friendly and outgoing. I made a new friend every day. When I had what I now know is limbic system impairment, I was sad, I was depressed, I was anxious, and I was always looking for an answer because it didn't make sense to me that I could go from this happy, vibrant, healthy person to this person that was chronically ill. So I'm still searching, still searching, still searching. And then I develop electric. So by then I've been diagnosed with multiple chemical sensitivities and fibromyalgia and probably anxiety and who knows what else. I've developed some food sensitivities, and then I developed electric hypersensitivity syndrome. And I didn't even know that this existed. But what that meant was that my body was now picking up on EMF fields from Wi Fi, from electrical appliances, from everything. And not only was I picking this up, but it was actually causing pain and symptoms. So at that point is a point when I became homeless. And I say that in a very specific way. I wasn't homeless in the sense that I didn't have money and I had to live on the streets. It was because my nervous system was so hyper vigilant and hypersensitive to all sensory stimuli that I could no longer live in my own house. And I could no longer go to a friend's house. I could no longer go to my mother's house. I could no longer go anywhere. And my only option that I saw at that time was to camp and be in the great outdoors because it was the only thing that I could think of where I would be actually away from EMF fields.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a sad day. And, I just want to give a big shout out to my partner, James. I can't believe he stayed with me through that and
Yeah.
supported me through that because he must have thought that I had lost my rocker.
Yeah.
But he knew me well enough to know that I hadn't gone crazy, that I was actually suffering, and that nobody had an answer. So thankfully, he supported me in this very wild journey into despair and hopelessness, and was my rock. I guess my hand held my hand in all of that. But
Wow.
throughout all of this, I have to say, I was already researching the brain because it seemed to me like it just wasn't making sense. I went for all of these treatments, but nothing was working. And I thought, well, there must be something else happening. So through deductive reasoning and research, I recognized that it was brain function. And when I recognized that it was the brain, it just made sense on so many levels. I'm like, of course it's the brain. It's distorting my sensory perception. You know what does that? The central nervous system, your brain. It creates cognitive dysfunction, all of it. It can, your brain can affect your immune system. I mean, it's the root of every health issue. Can start in the brain. The brain is a control center for optimal health. It is the director of everything. So it just made sense. Oh my goodness, what if this is a brain issue? And that was confirmed when I read Norman Doidge's book, The Brain That Changes Itself. And it was when I was reading a specific part about, he was interviewing Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, who works a lot with patients who have OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. And he was talking about a part of the brain called the caudate nucleus that just isn't able to actually shift it gets stuck in this gear, and people aren't able to move forward in their thinking because, or their feeling, because this part of the brain is stuck. And I thought, I don't have OCD. That's not it. Although I'm worried a lot and I'm anxious a lot because of any kind of exposure, but I don't have OCD. But what I thought that I might have is a brain that was stuck in a fight, flight, or freeze response. It was like I always felt like I was under threat somehow, that something, my sensory system was off, my emotional set point was off, my cognitive ability was off, my immune system was off, everything was off. And it was as if I was being under attack all of the time. So you can imagine, as a past counselor, I
Yeah.
went down the looking for the emotional root cause of everything
Yeah.
first. I'm like, I need to get to the bottom of this. This is obviously something from my childhood that is coming up again in a different form. And if I only heal that, then that will resolve this issue.
Yeah.
So I worked that from here to Mars and back. And guess what? Nothing happened. And even it was interesting because even though I came to some kind of understanding, I thought, well, yes, maybe I felt traumatized as a child, or I didn't feel safe as a child. Maybe that's what's coming into my adulthood. Maybe I'm just not feeling safe as an adult. Well, I can tell you, I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of work on myself, and I know how to do that work. And it did not work. All of the tools that I did before in my life that would, prior to having the limbic system injury, that were really great tools, and reframing, healing, letting go, whatever, did not work when I had limbic system impairment. They would work temporarily. I might have a different understanding for about 10 minutes. I'd go through all of the things that I would usually do to let go of something. And yet 10 minutes later, I found my brain on the same wheel. And it was the same trauma wheel. It was the same threat wheel, the same, I feel like I'm going to die wheel. So it was interesting. It was like, okay, obviously that approach does not fix limbic system impairment. So how can I look at this feeling and reacting part of the brain to see how I can manipulate, get in, try to affect change on that part of the brain? And it was in reading Norman Doidge's book again that I was really inspired to look at ways to create change in that part of the brain. And that was the answer. So it was a good question to have, and an amazing answer, because after I discovered how to really influence the limbic system in my brain, this feeling and reacting part of my brain that sends messages to all other systems of the body, my symptoms went away. Now, let me repeat, my symptoms went away. Now, it even seemed miraculous for me, because I'm like, how could that be possible? How could every doctor that I went to, every specialist that I went to, every detox treatment that I did, every supplement that I tried, how come none of that worked and yet this did? And what makes sense is that I just didn't have the right entryway. This is a brain impairment that needs to be addressed through neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is actually just means the brain's ability to change. So I guess I'll stop there because I have lots of information to give you, and I want to give you the opportunity to ask a question.
My questions are just building up and my mind's being blown right now, Annie. So it's so was it from what you read in that book but then you created your own system?
Yes, yes. Excuse me, I need a drink of water.
I'm wondering if part of that, you creating your own system for this, is it something that came to you quite easily, as in like you hear from people certain that when ideas come to them, or a method or a protocol or whatever it is, it's like it becomes downloaded into their brain from some other source. And I've had that happen to myself before, where it's like, oh, that's what I have to do, this is what I got, and it's just, and I'm just wondering if there was there a part of that, like you read this book but then you developing your own system came to
Yeah,
you?
I had a lot of influences. I mean, I was already in the field of
Yeah.
psychology and looking at the brain function and looking at mind body interconnectedness and all of that. So that wasn't new for me. And certainly changing my belief about something wasn't new to me either. So making that shift of maybe it's not this, maybe it's that, was not something that was a really big uh, jump for me.
Hmm.
It certainly was different, but it wasn't like this huge, oh my goodness, because I think I've just been through so many experiences where my reality has changed so drastically just by thinking about something from a
In a
different
different way. Yeah.
that it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And there are a lot of pioneers in this field, like Dr. Norman Doidge, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, Dr. Ramachandran,
Yeah.
who worked with the using imagination to change the brain. So there are many leaders ahead of me. I just happen to coalesce the information into a distinct package that people could use. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's so great. Well, I
Mhm.
can, I'm an open book, so I'll say that, hearing you talk about your story, I didn't have mold and I didn't have a car accident, but all of the list of things that happened to you very similarly happened to me, all within like a 3 to 6 month time frame, where I suddenly got multiple food sensitivities, chemical sensitivities, chronic insomnia, chronic migraines, fatigue, pain in the body. All this happened in a very short period of time. And so I think, well, what was my trauma? So let's talk about what else that could be then, because could it be that we did get a trauma in our childhood and then it kind of reawakens when we're in an adulthood because of something that happens, or like it was yours just from the car accident and the mold that triggered it?
Yeah. Excuse me. I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. Excuse me. I'll take another sip of water before I answer that. Thank you.
It's okay. We're COVID's everywhere right now, so people are used to us, people being sick.
I don't have COVID. It's just a
No.
frog, I think. But anyway, yeah, there are many causes of limbic system impairment, and it doesn't. It's interesting when you look at, whether you feel safe as a child, looking at your childhood environment. Certainly, I think that if your level of safety is threatened when you're a child, then you can imagine the flight or flight centers in your brain are firing a little bit more rapidly than the average bear, right? True,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just a self-protective mechanism. You're going to be more aware of your environment because you don't feel safe. So that's okay. Do I think that that necessarily leads into limbic system impairment, just that itself? I don't know, perhaps it could, but it hasn't been my experience that that alone causes limbic system impairment. Usually it's a number of different traumas. So it could be, for example, it could be emotional trauma, like the loss of a loved one, a separation, a divorce. It could be chemical exposure. So you move into a new place and you're surrounded by a lot of furniture or things that are off-gassing, volatile organic compounds. So just exposure, chemical exposure can cause that trauma. And that's not unusual for people that have multiple chemical sensitivities, that they had some kind of exposure prior to developing limbic system impairment. Also, emotional viruses or bacteria. That's another form of trauma on your system. So that,
Really?
yeah, for
And
sure.
heavy metals too?
Yes, absolutely. Heavy metals too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's
Because
not necessarily emotional. It could just
it's
be
not,
simply from an infection or something that happened with heavy metal toxicity, Lyme disease, mold, all these very common things right now that
yes.
your body sees as a trauma in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, your brain and its innate wisdom actually puts up the flight or fight mechanisms in place because you're dealing with a real threat. You're dealing with a bacteria, you're dealing with a virus, you're dealing with Lyme, you're dealing with something, right? So, or you're dealing with this chemical. So your body is trying to protect itself, which is amazing. We have all of these innate self-protective mechanisms that kick into gear. But what happens is it gets stuck. And that's the problem is the brain gets stuck in this fight, flight, or freeze response, and it does not recognize when the threat has gone or is no longer present. So it's as if For people that have chemical sensitivities, like I know I actually did have a chemical exposure. It was the janitor supply room. The tipping point was walking through chapters, and I walked through a scented candle display.
Oh,
It
yeah,
wasn't.
that's like my nightmare.
I mean, the scented candle display, it wasn't the scented candle display that created the injury. It was everything else that was accumulated. And that was the tip of the iceberg, right? So, yeah, I mean, I don't use scented candles in my home. I don't think they're healthy. They're not, right? So, but anyway, back to what caused it. It can be a number of various traumas. So, we're talking chemical, could be chemical exposure, viral, bacterial, it could be emotional, or it could be a one-time psychological trauma. Like people have PTSD.
Mhm.
They have that one-time psychological event and their brain gets stuck in that trauma response. So it's not, yeah. And I think that one thing that I really want people to understand, especially when we're so immersed in self-help and wanting to figure it out, and we take on the super responsibility of trying to figure all of it out, is that this is not your fault. You did not attract this to you in any way, shape, or form. This is a brain trauma. And we have to resolve a brain trauma through methods that actually help us change brain function. So your brain has been changed through trauma. So the actual structure and function of your brain has been changed through trauma. The program that I developed helps you be in the driver's seat to help change the structure and function of your brain so that your brain can be healthy again and be out of that stuck trauma response. And when you get unstuck from that response, your sensory perception returns to normal. Your immune system starts acting in a way that it should. Uh, you have energy again. The energy in your body is no longer used for fighting something, it's actually used for healing and regeneration. So when you get back to that level space, then healing is possible. Not only is healing possible, but you feel like an entirely different person because you're no longer reacting. Your body is no longer in this well of chronic illness, but you're in a place of thriving. And in that place, anything is possible. So, yeah, I'm not sure how I got there.
Oh, it's so good. What about, so if it is a mold exposure, Lyme, heavy metal, these things, do we have to still take care of those? Like do the heavy metal chelation, get rid of the mold, get rid of the Lyme in order to heal and for that to for your system to work? Like what comes first? Or
That's a great question. Do I have an answer to that? I'm gonna think about that
yeah,
for a
okay.
second. I do. I think it's different for different people. I would definitely, if you have mold in your house, you don't want to live in a moldy house,
Mhm.
right? Like that just makes common sense. You need to get your home remediated, and if you have any kind of mold in your body, it would probably be a good thing to remove that mold. Or if you have heavy metals in your system, it would probably be a good idea to detoxify. But if that is not getting you back to complete and optimal health, then there's something else going on. So it's not that all of these other treatments aren't helpful or supporting your body in some way, but if your brain is stuck in a fight, flight, or freeze response, no matter how much you treat it, it doesn't actually help that much because your system can't accept the nutrients that are being supplied. Detox pathways are actually affected with limbic system impairment because you can imagine if you're, I always relate it to running away from a tiger, right? If you're running away from a tiger, your elimination processes aren't important. What's important is running away.
Yeah.
So, your ability to digest or eliminate is not important. It's secondary to your survival. So that's why, maybe the detoxification treatments aren't working as effectively as they should be. Maybe all the nutritional supplements that someone might take might not make them feel better because your body might not be able to absorb it as it would when you're healthy. So it's not uncommon for people that I see that go through the program that go, wow, you know what? I might need a little bit of nutritional support while my brain is in the rewiring process. But my goodness, when I get to that place of an even balanced limbic system, guess what? You know what? I threw bags and bags of nutritional supplements, all the coping mechanisms that you have in place to try to just get through the day, right? So, you no longer need to do that. So, to answer your
Yeah.
question, yes, it's good to address the cause if that's part of the cause. And you also want to rewire your brain, because if the treatments that you're trying are not effectively working, then there's something else going on.
Hmm.
That's where you start to look at, hang on a second, there is brain involvement. My brain is stuck in this fight, fight, or freeze response. And it's no fault of your own. Your brain just got stuck there.
Yeah, my take on it is that if the mold, the Lyme, whatever infection created that limbic system response, you could chelate or get rid of the mold, but the brain is still going to be in that place. And so you may chelate it out. And I see this happen a lot where the person will get rid of the Lyme, they'll take the medication for mold, they'll get to do heavy metal chelation and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. And then the test showed that it's gone, and yet they're still sick. And
Yes.
something else shows up. Well, I still have this, I still have that. Why do I still, why am I going through this? And I think that that's why, obviously, that because the brain hasn't been able to heal, but maybe the body, that infection is gone now that created it, but this still hasn't been fixed, the brain.
Yes, absolutely. And even when we look at gut issues like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? Well, you can imagine that if you're stuck in a flight, fight, or freeze response, your peristaltic wave is not working functionally. So when you're healthy, that tends to itself, right? But when you're stuck in a flight, fight, or freeze response, your peristaltic wave is not working functionally, so you don't have the opportunity to clear out that bacteria. It's the same for, people have food sensitivities and get this expanding list of food sensitivities, and they start elimination diets, and they think that, well, if I eliminate that food, it's going to work. But then all of a sudden you're eliminating more and more and more foods, and you're still not getting any better. Well, our gut is taking cues from our vagus nerve, actually, that innervates all of our gut and the microbiome. But if your limbic system is sending direct messages to your vagus nerve that you are not safe, that there is no safe place for this body to be in, to rest in, then all bets are off with any kind of vagus nerve innervation. So it's interesting if you look at, it just makes sense that reasoning, if you start at the top and go top bottom, it actually works. So you start by rewiring the limbic system, and that affects all of the downstream systems. So rather than trying to start at the downstream symptoms, which is where we typically start,
Yeah.
we're starting at a different entry point. And it just so happens that it happens to be the missing link for a lot of people.
Hmm. Is
Mhm.
there an easy way that you can explain actually what's going on in the brain? Because, a lot of people don't understand what even the limbic system is, or what areas of the brain, like how is it that our brain, what do you mean by getting it caught in a fight or flight response? What is this have to do with cortisol? This, is it that kind of
Yeah,
thing? Like, is there a way to explain so people can understand where you're coming from with it?
sure. Let me see if I can break that down for you. So basically, the limbic system is a set of structures in your midbrain that are responsible for they're responsible for a lot of things. They're involved in emotion, in memory, but also in evaluating threat. So it's taking the billion bits of sensory information and emotional information, all this information, and distilling it into very distinct categories, threat or no threat. Now, so you can imagine, so let's talk about the different structures for a second. So you have the thalamus, which is relaying all of this information to different areas of the brain. Then you have the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. So when you're stuck in flight or freeze, your amygdala is firing all of the time, going, there's a danger, we're in danger, we're in danger. It then sends messages to the hippocampus, which is in the limbic system as well, which is where we form memories. It's responsible for both or involved in both short and long-term memory. So we remember that trauma for future protection. Then it also activates the hypothalamus, and that's the area of the brain that releases all the beautiful hormones and chemicals that, like cortisol, like you said. So, you know, the hypothalamus is constantly sending messages to the other areas of the body to start releasing cortisol constantly to try to keep up with these stressors. So that's what I mean by the brain gets stuck in this fight, flight, or freeze response, or we also call it the limbic loop. So your brain starts looping in this trauma response. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I hope that makes sense to everybody that's listening too. And you know what? You don't even have to, if you don't get it, if it goes right over your head, that's okay because, well, A, you're probably stuck in this system. So it might be hard to retain that information. But also, it's just you can just trust in the system to work. You don't need to necessarily understand what's going on in the brain, I think.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. And it's funny. I mean, you could look at that another way. Like you could use the analogy of running away from a tiger again. You know, if you're running away from a tiger because you feel unsafe, you're not gonna stop and text your friends and say, "Hey, run away," right? Communication is not important. You're like, run as fast as you can. You're not going to be able to digest or rest as well as you probably could. Your detoxification pathways are going to become compromised. Your ability to fight disease is compromised. So your immune system isn't working functionally as well anymore. Your endocrine system and your hormones will be changing because of that. And basically, all systems of your body can be affected. So I think that that's the easiest way to explain it.
Mhm.
Kind of tiger analogy. And
Yeah.
interesting, yes, you don't have to understand exactly how your brain works in order for the program to work for you. But it's kind of like somebody saying, well, how does your heart work? How do your lungs work? It's like, we don't really question how they work a lot. We just know that they do work. So you can know that your brain works in wonderful and magical ways and mysterious ways, and that we have the ability to self-direct change in neural pathways in the brain. And I think that's the most exciting part of that. And also that is the missing link. It's like
Mhm.
we have the ability to self-direct changes within our brain, and we know that's true through meditation. We know that
Mhm.
meditation, there are many studies on meditation, how meditation can change the actual structure and function of the brain. And likewise with the dynamic neural retraining system, it does create changes in the brain as well. Just the path to get there is a different path, but we do know that it creates changes.
Neuroplasticity in and of itself is quite new in the medical world, is it not? Like 20 years, am I want to say?
Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, it's really been in the news in the last 20 years. It's
Yes.
been around for about yeah, in the last 20 or 30 years, I would say that it's really grown in its understanding and
Mhm.
how it relates to health, and really looking at ways that we can implement change in the brain.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's the greatest breakthrough in neuroplasticity, and looking at brain function is realizing that the brain not only has the capacity to heal, but it also has a capacity, and the flip side of that is the brain has a capacity to change for the good or the bad,
Mhm.
right? So trauma changes the brain structurally, and we know that through self-directed neuroplasticity or other forms of neuroplasticity treatments, that we can actually go in and change the structure and function of the brain too. And that the brain is a unique organ into itself. I always say to people, we're smart as human brain beings, but our brains are not so smart. Our brain is a pattern recognition organ, and it's constantly looking for patterns that it already knows. And
Yeah.
our job with healing the brain is to change those patterns as much as we can in a very specific, deliberate way. Mhm.
I read The Buddha Brain. Have you read that?
Pardon me?
Have you read The Buddha's Brain or The Buddha Brain?
Yeah, I think so, a long time ago, but remind me.
I read it a long time ago, but that's when I realized neuroplasticity and what it could do and how the brain worked. There was something in it where he explains like where pathways in the brain that we're used to going down. So if it's a trauma or we're used to going down into that place that's maybe not so great. It's like a great big highway that you're taking your car down. It's easy. So easy to go down that pathway in your brain because you've done it so many times. And when you're trying to create new pathways, because we know the brain can be changed, he said it's like putting your car in this little tiny hole or a little tiny cut. It's so hard to get down, and it's so much easier to go down this great big highway. And so you have to just keep at it until that becomes the new highway. I thought that was a good way to explain it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was thinking about that on the weekend because it had snowed here, and which it rarely does. And I was thinking about, that first toboggan, that first run when there's a fresh snow. The first
Yeah.
run is kind of tough. You're not going very fast, but as you continue to go down that run, you get faster, and the run becomes quicker. And that's exactly it. That's neuroplasticity in action. So with the program, we're really blocking we're putting blocks up to old neural pathways that the brain is used to taking in a trauma response and building new neural pathways that lead to optimal health. It's like, hang on a second, you don't have to go down that trauma route anymore. You don't have to go down that trauma route. And that trauma route expresses as a number of different things, not only physically with all these different physical issues, but thought processes and emotional set points are affected too. And that's something that people don't usually think about when they think, oh, I have this illness, but what are my thinking patterns? And it's not, again, I need to get back to this. It's not your fault that your brain patterns are thinking about, oh, what about the next exposure? Or, I don't want to go here. I don't want to go there, or whatever. It's a self-protective mechanism. Again, you're not making it up. It's just that, the brain is stuck in this state. But emotionally too, this is interesting. I'm so glad that we went here. Emotionally, it changes your emotional set point, because when you are in survival, there's no room for joy.
Hmm.
Joy seems like, I remember being sick, and I remember thinking, happy people are not in reality. Like, like, they are just in denial about what's
They're
going on.
delusional.
And I used to be a happy person. And I'm like, how could that change so drastically? But it was because I didn't have access to it anymore. So because I didn't have access, I thought that it was ridiculous that people would be joyful or people would be happy. But you can imagine that if your brain is stuck in a fight, flight, or freeze response, and survival is what you're concerned about, then feeling joy and feeling happy is not related to survival.
Mm-mm.
So part of getting the brain out of that response means that we have to start thinking and feeling and behaving in different ways to get the brain to stop taking those old patterns. And I think that's the I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's like, really, that's what it takes,
Yeah.
is to think, feel, and behave differently to rewire the brain, and then I can get rid of all of these chronic illnesses that left me homeless. Really? And the answer is yes.
Yes. And
But
you see this, like you've told me, with hundreds of people on a daily basis. Like this isn't something that, oh, the odd person's getting help from it. You see it every day, all day in your groups and in your programs. So let's talk about what are some common things that you're seeing that people are recovering from. Does everybody have to be to where you were, where they're
no,
EMF and their chemical sensitivity and they can't go outside or anything like that? Like, what are the different levels and chronic illnesses that you're seeing being helped by
that's
DNRS?
a really great question. First of all, I'm going to say there's a spectrum of illness. So, like anything with limbic system impairment, you have a full spectrum. Could be mild to really severe. I happen to have a really severe form of it. But do you have to have a severe form before you, you do retraining to rewire your limbic system? Not at all. Actually, that's my goal, is to get to people earlier so that we can stop years of needless suffering, right? I mean, if I would have known about this in the beginning of my journey, then I probably wouldn't have become homeless, right? So
Mhm.
we can, the sooner you start to implement the program, I think the easier it is in some ways, because you haven't developed a whole belief system around your illness either.
Right.
or you've been seeped in being sick for so long. So, there's a spectrum. I would love to see people start earlier on in their journey. And we have a lot of doctors that refer their patients to the program now. So I'm really, really pleased about that. But what that also says to me is that we're seeing people earlier on in their journey. And that really, really makes me happy, because I'm like, oh, okay, you've only been sick for less than a year. Thank you, because
Wow.
a lot of the times we're hearing people that have been sick for 20 years or
Mhm.
25 years or 10 or 15 years. So um, typically I will say that the program would work for any illness that you think that there is a maladaptive stress response related to. Now, the most common, which could be a lot, and it is a lot, because I'm constantly surprised at people that are emailing and phoning in and saying, wow, I came to the program for multiple chemical sensitivities, but really what happened is I also resolved lifelong depression and anxiety. I'm like, great, because it makes sense. If you're dealing at the root cause of what's causing all of this, then you can expect to see changes in other things that you didn't even think that were related. So some of the more common conditions that we see: multiple chemical sensitivities. I'm going to try to write them down as we go. Multiple chemical sensitivities, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, food sensitivities, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is associated with mold illness. What am I forgetting? Electric hypersensitivity syndrome, depression, anxiety, uh, and more recently, post-COVID syndrome. So the people that are the long haulers from post-COVID. And it makes sense to me that they would definitely respond well to the program, because they're being diagnosed with things like chronic fatigue syndrome, or POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a form of dysautonomia. So yeah, we're seeing lots of really great response from people that have chronic COVID, or the long haulers. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting. And, in terms of recovery stories, I mean, we have a global community forum that is for people that have taken the program, either if they've taken the 14-hour instructional video. And that global community forum is free to any members who've already taken the program, and are implementing the program. And we have, I don't know, about 9,500 members on there right now.
Wow.
So and these are people that are, they're your peer support group, right? So,
Your
uh,
community.
yeah, their community. So it's huge, so there are endless stories of recovery, and yeah, just a gold mine of information and tips for practicing and support. We also have individual coaching for people that have gone through the program. So if you need more one-on-one assistance, or you're trying to figure out certain elements of the program, or you don't understand it for whatever reason, then our certified coaches can help people with that. We also have a 12-week support group, or group support calls, which are called Living DNRS, for up to 24 people. And those are over Zoom. And we just released one of our classes, which is called Share a Laugh. And elevating your emotional state is an important part. It's one of the pillars of recovery, with limbic system impairment and with the dynamic neuroretraining system program. So we've created a class that can help people elevate their emotional state on a consistent basis. So yeah,
Wow.
there's lots of support for people, and yeah, lots of inspiring recovery stories.
Yeah. And so the core of the program, if people are interested, does everybody start with the core online program that you sell?
Yeah, so it's a 14-hour instructional video, and it can be, you can purchase it through streaming video, or in a DVD format. And then once they've completed that, they have access to all of our other support services. And the other support service that I forgot to mention is a 5-hour follow-up video that we released in July of 2020, called A Deeper Dive. So I looked at all of the 10 years of experience of working with people, and looking at, okay, so what are some added information pieces that people might need to know, or how can we make their experience and their understanding, or improve their understanding and experience of the program. So that's a 5-hour follow-up video, again, called A Deeper Dive. So lots of support, and
Yeah.
lots of ways to engage in that support.
But it's not It's not you watch the 14-hour video and you're done, is it? Let's just be clear. For all of this, we live in this in this society of quick fix. And if it's not going to heal me within a week, then, we need to be very patient. And I think that is so applies to this. It took a long time for a lot of people to get to where they are, and it may take some time to get them out of that place in their brain.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Karen. We recommend that people practice for a minimum of 6 months, every day for a minimum of 6 months. And, we firmly believe that that's the amount of time that you need to rewire your brain. It might take longer than that for some people, and that's okay. Like you said, it takes a while to get to that place, so it might take a while to unwind those circuits in the brain, and that's okay. I mean, you've got the rest of your life. It's very little effort when you think about comparing that to coping mechanisms and the energy that goes into trying to just get through the day and the million coping mechanisms that are involved with that. So I always look at it from an energy expenditure perspective. It's like, okay, well, I'm putting all this energy into avoiding everything or taking, lots of supplements or trying to figure out this or that or the other thing. And I could be spending that energy on actually rewiring my brain and putting that time into this productive practice that will get me out of that chronic illness cycle. So it doesn't take, when you think of it from that perspective, it doesn't take that much time
No,
at all, especially for people that have been sick 10 or 15 years, right? It's like
it's
sick.
exhausting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You're in that constant mode of chasing and going down the rabbit hole on the Google. And okay, and I know this from experience. I'll listen to a podcast and hear somebody speak, or I find a new supplement or a new program and it's like, oh, well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe this is the answer. And the time and energy a person can waste, I mean, compared to, like you said, maybe 6 months it might take, that is nothing in comparison to the energy that is wasted on trying to figure these things out for some people, a lifetime.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we have really exciting research that's come out from McMaster University. It's an observational research study that shows improvements in people that have gone through the program with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, chemical sensitivities, anxiety, and depression. And we're looking at doing more research. And so, yeah, that's really exciting. The medical system doesn't change overnight. It's
No.
a very difficult beast to change. It's like yeah, I don't even know what the analogy is to describe that. But medical studies are hard to get, especially on something that doesn't have, like, this is not funded by pharmacy, from
Right.
big pharmacy. This is a self-directed neuroplasticity approach. So, no one's going to really, pharmaceuticals aren't really interested. People are interested in getting the research because there's no value added for them, right?
Right. Yeah.
So getting medical research on something that is self-directed is quite
Impossible.
interesting. uh, we're glad that we're moving in that direction, and I'm super happy that we've already had some research done, and it's going to take a while before this trickles down into the medical system. But I speak at a lot of conferences, medical conferences, and brain injury conferences, and the American Academy of Environmental Medicine and the Institute for Functional Medicine. So, the word is getting out there, and more and more doctors are referring their patients and seeing great results. So I think that,
It's
that
happening.
it's happening. It is happening. So
It is. I've already started referring people to you. I was listening to a podcast recently with Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. And I don't
right.
know if you heard of him, but that's his thing now, is sending people to you, because he's like, he thinks that has to be part of every program that people go on for Lyme disease. Like, it's like you've got to do the DNRS as well. So, and Chris Kresser, Joseph Mercola, I've heard you on. So I know that those guys have massive followings, and they like me have seen it in their own practice, where you get the person that, you're the 20th person that they've seen in the last, 2 years, and they're just scrambling going, please, can you be the person to help me? And sometimes I have to say, I'll do what I can here, but I think you also need to do this. And so I've been sending people your link just to say, you know what, check this out, see if it connects with you. And now I'll be able to send them the podcast, which is great.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Annie. I really appreciate it. I'm going to take the program. I know that. So I'll be able to speak to it soon enough, and I'll be sure to mention it again on another podcast once I've completed it.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. It was a pleasure to be on your show. And yeah, I just say have fun with the program. Don't overthink it too much. And please reach out to all of our support services because we're here for you every step of the way. So thank you so much and keep me posted.
Yes, I will. Thank you.